And a very pleasant Tuesday evening to everybody, and we welcome you to what is kind of a sports theme on Tuesday night here on Ridgecrest Talk. I'm Tom Heck, Justice Scott. He's been with us before. He's a head baseball coach over at Saracoso College. But tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in the NFL and college football. But first, we want to kind of touch base just a little bit on one of the most successful programs we have here in Ridgecrest, and that's the senior team from the IWV Football League. Now, this team starts training in August. They're made up of 7th and 8th graders, and this was the very team that last year won the entire Super Bowl. And these kids all are attending Burroughs High School, and last year's team comprised this year's freshman team. And the freshman team might have been the best that Burroughs High School ever had. They were 9 wins, 1 loss. They won the Mojave River League, easily won the Mojave River League, and now next year a lot of those guys will play varsity football for head coach Todd Mather. But let's talk about the group this year. It was a super group, and now Justice, he's got a son on the team who's one of the main players, but the reason I want to bring this up is he was at the game on Saturday night. The game was over at Little Rock High School in Little Rock, and it was a battle between East Side, which is from the Palmdale area, and Ridgecrest. And Ridgecrest had only lost 1 game, and that was to the same team that beat them on Saturday night. Talk about the game.
Well, it was. I'm very fortunate that my oldest son, Brooks, was able to play with those guys. Great team, Ridgecrest, great team, great coaching staff. And actually, Saturday night in that championship game was one of the best youth games I've seen since all my kids started playing sports. It was just a tremendous contest. It was going back and forth, and 2 teams, young men getting after each other, guys playing hurt. So it was a great game to watch. Very exciting. Started off East Side, got up 13-0, and going into the first half, Ridgecrest picked off a ball about the 50 and brought it back 13-7. So you think big momentum's going into halftime, and about a minute left. There's a kickoff, and East Side runs it back for a touchdown. So now it's 20-7 at halftime, and our boys battled back and scored 2 touchdowns in the third, made it 20-20, and again it was going back and forth. And East Side, just tremendous athletes. There wasn't a kid on that team that was non-athletic, and that's how they ended up beating them 28-20. They had 4 or 5 big plays in the course of that game, just by pure athletic ability. A lot of speed, a lot of size, but those guys, the Ridgecrest team played real hard and gave them everything they got. And it was injuries, I think, through the course of the season kind of got Ridgecrest down a little bit. Guys playing out of position, and I know the starting quarterback for most of the year was out, and so they filled guys in. So, but again, it was a great season, tremendous end of a season with watching play a game like that.
Now, some pretty good size, I understand, from East Side's team.
Oh, correct. They were a couple of them looked like me. I mean, from the stands anyway, that you're thinking, man, these guys are, they're 14 years old, but they look like grown men. There's 4 or 5 of them, and all of them were in skilled positions. You had a couple of running backs, and I think the wide receiver, guessing, was probably 6 foot, 6'1", maybe even 6'2". And there were a couple of big plays there where they just kind of lofted it up to him, and he just jumped over guys and made the catch.
No, the game was played under the lights for most of it, correct?
Correct, yeah. At 4 o'clock start, and so about start of the second quarter it was under the lights, which I know those guys, the players like. First night game of the year in the Super Bowl, and again, I can't. If you're there, you'd understand it. It was just a lot of times when you watch young guys play sports, but especially football. It's kind of a back and forth, and guys getting hurt, kind of coming out, and lulls in the game. And this for the entire 4 quarters was just tremendous youth football. Kids making plays they haven't made all year. And again, like I said, a few guys playing hurt, and normally they kind of come off, and they were staying out. They were waving coaches off. I'm not coming out. So again, it was very fun to watch both teams with athletic ability playing some football.
Now, the neat thing is next year a lot of those kids will enter as freshmen in high school and play on the freshman football team at Burroughs. And as I mentioned, this year Burroughs had a great freshman football team. maybe the best, well, in a long, long time, or since I can remember. They finished 9-1. They won the league. And last year, as 8th graders and a few 7th graders, they went undefeated and easily won that Super Bowl. But this year, it sounds like the only game we were really pushed, and correct me if I'm wrong, was the first time we played Eastside.
Correct. The first game, I had a fall game, so I wasn't able to see it, but I got a recap from my wife. And it was the same type thing. Eastside got up. I believe the final score is 22-16 in that game, but they got up 16-0. And then we battled back and scored a couple touchdowns in the second half. But yeah, the 2 games that we lost this year were the East Side, and other than that, they kind of rolled through everybody. So yeah, I know Coach Mathers is, to your point, is pretty excited about that. He's got a couple classes in a row coming together.
Before we change the subject, I want to ask you. I know you were from Northern California,
Right.
and I know it's very big up there, youth football, and they do have a few different rules. It goes by weight, I guess by position, which I thought was interesting. But it sounds like there's a great turnout and support of kids here, and it's a very popular sport.
Oh, correct. We came from Northern California, about 40 minutes northeast of Sacramento, and a couple different rules. They call it the X-Man. So if you weigh a certain amount, you can't play a skilled position. You have to be on the line, offensive or defensive line, so you don't have 190-pound kids running the football. Safety issue. So there's that. A little difference, too, is it's more of a passing league. They threw a little bit more up here, where down here is more of a running, at least this year is a running league is what I saw. But yeah, great turnout there, and and here too. We had the fans here in town. We always had the most here at Ridgecrest. We always had the most fans on the way, on the road games, and at home too.
And there's 5 teams, I believe. Is that correct? 5 youth teams, starting with the seniors, going down to the Pee-wees.
Yeah, yep. You got varsity. Work backwards. You got varsity. You got junior varsity, and they call them different down here than up north. But then you got junior pee-wee,
midgets, or
and
is that?
junior midgets, I
Okay.
think, and then it goes, so there's 5 levels.
And they all have pretty much full teams, correct?
Correct. Yeah, and that's the only reason Brooks, my oldest, was able to play. My middle one couldn't because they were full. It just happened that the varsity team was shy a couple players, and so it was an easy transition they needed players. So we got fortunate. He was fortunate with that.
Okay, great. Well, there you have it. So IWV football, again, very successful, especially at the top levels, and a lot of kids really turn out for that. When we come back on our second segment, we're going to talk a little bit about college football, look at some rankings. We'll have some NFL numbers for you also. Don't go away. This is Ridgecrest Talk right here on KZGN. And we're back. Welcome. We're Ridgecrest Talk Tuesday night, our sports theme. I'm Tom Heck with Justice Scott. And tonight, in the first segment, we talked about the IWV senior football team and how successful they were. Now we're going to switch gears and talk about NCAA football. But before we do that, just an interesting note for baseball fans out there. The free agent market really in high swing right now. But Pablo Sandoval, who might have been the best player in the World Series, besides Madison Baumgartner, had a great World Series and had a great NLCS. He has gone now to Boston for a crazy amount of money, along with Hanley Ramirez, who was with the Dodgers, their starting shortstop, former National League leading hitter. He's also now gone to Boston. Very interesting. And then John Lester, who pitched for the Red Sox a year ago, was in the World Series, was picked up mid-season by the Oakland A's to try to keep the A's maybe in the best shape they could be in. They traded for Jonas Cepedas, who I thought was one of the best hitters in baseball, kind of the backbone of Oakland. Anyway, Lester now has been offered $135 million for 6 years by those Chicago Cubs. And that's the biggest offer the Cubs in their franchise history have ever put together, or anywhere in the National League. Your thoughts?
Well, again, there's 2 schools of thought. Loyalty, especially Major League Baseball, NBA too. but especially Major League Baseball, there's not much of it anymore. Guys are kind of rented out, like you said, rented out or go to the highest bidder. And the other school of thought is, you know what, you want that loyalty. You want guys to stick as a fan. You want guys to stick with their same team that you root for. So it just depends which side of the fence you fall on. Personally, I like, guys to stay loyal to a team, and you can watch them over and over again, especially if that's the team you root for. But you can't blame these guys for jumping around and getting what they can get. I mean, that's kind of the mentality of today's professional sports.
Mm-hmm. And the IRS shouldn't complain. I mean, they get half of that. So you would think, where does all this money go? Baseball gives out a lot of money, but are we, the normal people, seeing any of this? And even, below that, that's a whole nother topic right there. But you kind of wonder, I guess that's great that you can tax, I guess, up to 50%, whether it's fair or not. But where is that money actually going to, and who is it benefiting? I'd like to see it maybe just directly where we'd be transparent, help some of the more impoverished, cities with their youth sports programs, which I know some goes there, but I wonder how much and if enough goes there. All right, enough said with that. College football. Well, right now they came out again today with the top 25 teams, and what's important now is, remember, the new system this year, the playoffs, they're going to take the top 4 teams and they're going to battle it out. Now, a lot of people for years have been saying we need to do this, we need to do this. Some have even gone further and said we need to make it 8 teams, which would kind of be tougher because now you got to take another whole weekend, and you might, if you keep doing this, you're going to be playing into February. But let's talk about some of those teams and what we think might happen. Well, there's still a game left for some of these teams, and that's going to be a determiner probably for a lot of things. But Alabama right now is the #1 pick. Florida State, if you look in the other poll, is the #1 pick. But the only loss this year for Alabama, they just have that one heartbreak loss. And really, there's no loss at all for Florida State. But every game they play, Justice, has been down to the wire. Last weekend, a late field goal to beat Boston College. And then the week before that, a late score to beat Miami. They haven't exactly been flexing their muscles. And who do you think really deserves to be in that top 4 right now?
Great question. I don't think anybody knows other than probably the top 5 or 6 teams that are slated. You got Alabama, who plays in the best conference in the country, bar none. There's not even an argument for any other conference. So with one loss against the teams they've played, they got to be up there. And you say the same thing about Mississippi State. I don't know where they're falling, but they have one loss. You get to Florida State, defending national champions, haven't lost. I think they've, 23 in a row? Mm-hmm. So they got to be in there, even though they haven't, blown anybody out, like you said. But, you got to think about it this way, too. They're probably getting everybody's A game, because they know, hey, the #1 team last year, they're undefeated. We're gonna go in there. We're gonna be the first team to beat them, or they're just not as good as they were last year and just keep winning. So, and again, you got other SEC teams. You can have, you got Ole Miss is probably still in the mix. You got, LSU is a good football team, and then you have the TCU's mm-hmm. and Baylor, and you got a lot of teams that could argue for that 5th spot.
Let's take a look at what the experts have picked right now as a top 4. Now, this is not final for the playoffs, but Alabama 1, Oregon 2, the Quack Attack. Oregon only 1 loss all season long. That was week 3 back at home against the University of Arizona. Had they won that game, they would have run the gauntlet undefeated. They still have 1 game left. They play Oregon State, a big rival game coming up. It'll be up in Eugene this year, I do believe, not Corvallis. But if Oregon goes on the way they're going on, I think they got to be considered in that top 4.
No, absolutely. That they're same type thing. They've had a track record over the last few years of being in the mix at the end, and they're a great football team, great offense, playing a very good conference. Yeah, they went out. They're going to be in the top 4.
And then Mississippi State, who you talked about, only 1 loss, they're sitting at #4 right now. And then TCU, who has been demolishing people, had the one hiccup a few weeks ago in Lawrence. They barely beat the lowly Kansas Jayhawks. They're 34-30 in that game. That put them down a couple of numbers. But at 5, they're sitting pretty good. And Ohio State, who a lot of people kind of rode off. They've come back. They defeated Michigan State. They beat Minnesota, who Minnesota's playing great football. They just beat Nebraska last Saturday. So Ohio State has to finish with Michigan, but Michigan has lost 6 games, the most they've lost in ages since they probably started the napkin. I mean, Michigan football, that just doesn't happen. A tough year for them. But you've got TCU at 5, you've got Ohio State at 6, and then Baylor, who you spoke of, at 7, and then UCLA with 2 losses at 8. Now the Bruins had an easy win against USC on Saturday, kind of a good first half, not really a close second half. Where do you see them maybe?
I see UCLA kind of where they're at, 8, 9. I think it's going to be really tough to break into that top 4 with 2 losses. I think some dramatic things have to happen over the last couple of weeks. Now you're going to have potentially Alabama or Mississippi State losing in the SEC championship game, and then what do the voters do with that? It's an extra game more so than some other teams that don't have a conference championship. So very interesting. You might only have one SEC team in the top 4, but Ohio State's interesting too. They jumped from I believe 19 to 6 over 2 weeks, and they're a good football team. To me, the bottom line is it's going to shake out a little bit. There's going to be still some upsets.
Okay, when we come back for our last segment, we'll have a little bit more on college football. We'll talk about the NFL. Don't go away. This is Ridgecrest Talk right here on KZGN. And welcome back, Ridgecrest Talk. I'm Tom Heck, Justice Scott. We've been talking about an assortment of things tonight, and right now we're finishing up on college football. And this is kind of a cool time if you're a big football fan. The bowl games will be coming up soon, and boy, everybody gathers around and cheers on their favorite team. But we were kind of talking about the top 20 teams, and want to talk about UCLA real quick. They play Stanford on Friday night in the Rose Bowl. If UCLA can win that game, they will be the winners of the Southern Division of the Pac-12. They'll play against Oregon, who's already clinched the North. Even no matter what they do with Oregon State, they're there. And the winner of that game should go to the Rose Bowl. But if Oregon wins that game, which I'm thinking they will because it'll be in Eugene, then Oregon will probably be taken out of the Rose Bowl mix because of the fact they'll be in the top 4 mix. That would be something, wouldn't it?
That would be. And then who gets the nod for the Rose Bowl from the Pac-12?
I think you'd have to go with UCLA, but we'll have to see because that would only be 3 losses, which is respectable. Kansas State with Bill Snyder is another team that has only lost 2 football games. Arizona State was 7 from the Pac-12 until 2 weeks ago when they got ambushed up at Oregon State. They actually led at halftime, but were outscored 24-3 in the second half, and that put them way back at about 13, and that's where they are right now. Arizona State demolished Washington State. They beat up bad Notre Dame, and they went and laid the egg up in Corvallis. Minnesota playing great football, beat Nebraska and Lincoln, first time since 1960 on that one. And Louisville, don't forget Louisville, they beat Notre Dame. Notre Dame now with 4 losses. Boy, what's happened with the Irish?
Well, again, it's I think everybody thought with the return of their quarterback that they would be much better. They wouldn't have to be a 4-loss team. But sometimes during the season things happen, and we don't know about injuries or just not playing great football, and you lose a couple that you shouldn't.
And then we go to Boise State at 23 with that blue field of theirs. They demolished Wyoming on Saturday night. They're going to get a good bowl game. Marshall, the Thundering Herd, undefeated, but they play in that very, very weak American Football Conference there. They beat University of Alabama Birmingham 14-9, which doesn't go good for your scrapbook, but they will probably get a pretty good bowl game. And then Utah. They've been kind of a strange team from the Pac-12. They beat USC, they beat UCLA, they beat Stanford, and then they come home and they get drilled by the University of Arizona. Go figure.
Well, yeah, again, it's why you play the game. You hear coaches say that a lot. But Utah and Arizona State kind of remind me a little bit. You watch them, these guys are great. and then you watch them another time, like, well, these guys aren't very good. So, yeah, it's just, you know, up and down for whatever reason.
Arizona only 2 losses this year to USC and UCLA. Arizona plays Arizona State Friday night in Tucson, and if they win that game, the U of A or ASU, actually the winner of that game would go over UCLA if UCLA loses to Stanford. I don't think that'll happen, but that's a scenario that it would be. Hey, let's go over to the NFL. I know you love the NFL. We're all big NFL fans probably. At least we have one favorite team to cheer for usually. Let's look at the NFC East. New England 9-2. They lost 2 of their first 4 games, but they seem to have turned things around.
No, absolutely. And I remember the first, I think, week 3, all the pundits and all the experts saying, oh, New England's down, their run's over. And look what happens. They run off, 7 of 8, and they're right back, leading the AFC.
Miami, they've had a very good year. They're 6-5. They lost a heartbreaker Sunday at Denver, 39-36. Ryan Tannehill might be the most underrated quarterback in the NFL, so Miami's still in the hunt for a wild card. And then you look at the AFC North. You talk about parity, look no further. Cincinnati 7-3-1. They had a tie earlier with Carolina. And you have Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and Cleveland all at 7-4. That's anyone's league.
No, great conference and or great division, I should say, and they're just kind of beating up on each other and winning games out of their conference. But this is one of those things where this division is perfect. I don't know how you guys make money betting on the NFL. Not that I do, but you never know who's going to win from week to week.
Now, Cleveland has a good quarterback in Brian Hoyer. In fact, Hoyer didn't have a good game Sunday, took responsibility for it. Then you've got Johnny Manziel, Mr. Football, waiting in the wings after 2 years at Texas A&M. And his girlfriend is pleading and saying, hey, why is Johnny not getting time in the lineup? So we'll have to find out what happens there. Manziel was also implicated in a fight this past weekend also. So good old Johnny, not the season that I think he thought he might have as a rookie. I think he should have stayed one more year in college. But let's move on to the South. Indianapolis 7-4. Andrew Luck setting records all the time. I don't know how good they really are, though. They've had a lot of close games. Houston's in second at 5-6. They're probably going to win the division, but you look for them going very far.
The Colts could. I mean, and specifically because of Luck. I mean, he's a tremendous quarterback. You know, he's not up there and with Rodgers and a couple other guys, but he might turn out to be the best in the league here in a couple of years. Tremendous.
Then you got the West with Denver 8-3. Peyton Manning's had a pretty good year. Kansas City and San Diego both 7-4. Russell Wilson has been kind of up and down as a quarterback this year for the Chiefs. And then you've got the lowly Oakland Raiders at 1-10, and owner Art Davis considering moving that franchise to San Antonio, of all places. Wouldn't that be something?
That would be something. Maybe that's what they need to get out of state and start fresh.
Over in the NFC in the East, Philadelphia and Dallas both 8-3, which sets up a great game for Thanksgiving Day in Dallas, a traditional Thanksgiving Day game. Both teams 8-3. A big win for Dallas on Sunday night. Quick turnaround for Thursday. They beat up on the Giants. Giants have lost 6 in a row. Tough year for Tom Coughlin, who I think is one of the best coaches in the NFL. Let's look at the North. Green Bay 8-3 with Aaron Rodgers behind them. They're playing good football.
Yeah, I think Green Bay is maybe in the all NFC, to me, is the best team. At least right now how they're playing.
Detroit is 7-4. Minnesota 4-7 without Adrian Peterson. It's a shame they didn't have Peterson as far as wins and losses go. Teddy Bridgewater, the Louisville graduate, I think is the best rookie quarterback in the NFL. And in our last few seconds here, in the South, New Orleans and Atlanta and Carolina 4-7. How about that?
There you go, 4-7 in the first place. NFL.
And then in the West, Arizona was 9-1. They took a bump. They lost to Seattle this past week, 19-3. They're 9-2. Seattle 7-4.
Yeah, Arizona's a huge surprise. Maybe the biggest in the NFL. So it's nice to see somebody give Seattle and the Niners a run.
All right, Justice, thanks. We're going to have Justice back in January when it comes crunch time. We'll review the NFL season then. Also talk to him later in the spring with baseball. Thanks for tuning in tonight. Don't forget, every Tuesday night we have the sports team right here on Ridgecrest Talk. For Justice, I'm Tom Heck, bidding you a very pleasant good evening right here on KZGN.